This is Alan Stewart out here at B&B Yacht Designs, and I've come in a bit early because I want to do a walk around tour of Graham's new boat, Carlita. He had this boat at the Everglades Challenge last year, 2016, but she was all gray, and she's since been painted a beautiful red color. And Graham has been spending the last month or so finishing all the last little details on the boat, getting it ready, and he's going to be leaving soon to sail the boat down to Florida to participate in the 2017 Everglades Challenge. So I'm going to do just a walk around, and we'll get up inside the boat. I want to show everybody all the little details of the boat so everybody can have a chance to see it. And just starting around here, we've got 4 ports, 2 on each side, and these are part of our CS17 Mark III kit now. These are B&B deadlights, we're calling them, with a plywood trim ring, a Lexan 6mm window, and then you'll see on the inside a trim ring with bolts, so there's no fasteners visible on the outside. And Graham's got a rub rail here with a 3/4 inch hollow back stainless to protect the gunnel of the boat when he's at the dock. This is something that's not shown in the kit, but Graham wanted to get the oar locks a little bit lower, and so he's taken this down about 2 inches from the shear strake line and just built this in with plywood and put a block under here, and that gets the oar locks a little bit lower, which just means you don't have to hold your hands up so high when you're rowing. You sit there when you row, and so his oar locks have this little cutout. One of the really cool features of Graham's boat is the self-steering wind vane, and a lot of people don't understand how this works, but essentially this here is a frame, and it gets filled in with a Dacron sail, and that acts as a wind vane. It always points into the wind, and it's counterbalanced with a lead weight, so this axis here, the wind vane, is balanced on either side of this axis to reduce friction. The wind vane, when you get the boat on course, the wind vane points directly into the wind, and when the wind vane's pointed directly into the wind, if the boat gets off course, it moves this tab back and forth, and that arm here is connected to this linkage, and the linkage goes over here to an auxiliary rudder. This is what's called a vertically pivoting wind vane with an auxiliary rudder. So this white rudder here is totally separate from the main rudder, and when you're using the wind vane in self-steering mode, the main rudder is down and there's a tiller clutch, and the tiller is fixed in position, so it's acting as a skeg essentially. And the auxiliary rudder pivots just like a normal rudder, but it's about 1/3 the size of the main rudder, and it has a trim tab that can work back and forth, and the trim tab is linked to the wind vane. So when you get off course, the tiller arm is pushed over, which activates the trim tab. The trim tab, by extension, pushes the rudder over, just like when you pull up an elevator on an airplane, the airplane rotates. Well, in this case, it's the rudder that rotates. And so the trim tab itself is not steering the boat, but because the trim tab forces the rudder over, that then forces a correction in the boat. So in this case, trim tab going this way pushes the auxiliary rudder this way, which would turn the boat to starboard. And there's a little wheel here, and by turning this wheel you can make a fine-tune adjustment of the wind vane. Say if you want to move a few degrees to port or a few degrees to starboard. And underneath is a clutch to completely disengage the wind vane. So if I rotate this clutch down, now the wind vane, you can see, is disengaged from the mechanism, and it can weathercock without the auxiliary rudder trim tab being affected. What complicates this on a small boat is that our rudders are kick up for shallow water, And the auxiliary rudder has to be kick up as well, which makes it complicated with all these linkages. And so if you look down here, there's a line going across and a PVC pipe clip, and he's got a cleat here. If we undo that cleat, we can grab a hold down at the base and actually pop this totally up, and this can kick up. And that's something that's unique about self-steering wind vane setups. Almost none of them are kick up, but this one is. So that gets locked down into position, and then this line here is used as a extra hold down. And the linkages are adjustable. They're all threaded, and that way you can fine-tune the wind vane for certain conditions. By putting it in these different holes, you can get more or less power, more or less travel on the wind vane. So that's the wind vane system. Everybody's been asking about it. We are going to draw this up as a set of plans, but we cannot offer these as pre-built units or as a kit. They're just too complicated. But we will draw up plans for them. And the wind vane itself, it pivots on this bracket, and it's a clock mechanism type bearing. It's a pin there with a starboard bushing, so it's resting on a very small point, which gives it very low friction. And if we move around here, the other obvious change, or the other obvious thing that the Graham's boat has is a bumpkin, which are these nice pieces of dug fir sticking back through the transom. They extend forward and they're through bolted into the seat stringers. And this is actually strong enough to lift the back end of the boat up with. And the reason this is necessary is to make sure that the mizzen sheet, when it goes up to the mizzen sprit, clears the wind vane. So if you look here at the mizzen sprit, the sprit is actually a little bit longer than necessary to extend it further aft, so that the sheet line can go, where is it, between here, and the wind vane can actually spin around in there without fouling the mizzen sheet. Moving over here, we've got a 2.5 horsepower Suzuki outboard. It just barely clears, but it fits fine, and we're now recommending these to be put on the starboard side of the boat because the handle just barely hits here, but just lifting it up a little bit, you have full range of motion with the outboard, so it's really not that big a deal, and most of the time the outboard's pointed dead straight anyway. But this is, of course, a reversible motor, so a non-reversible motor, so you spin the entire motor around to get reverse. And in the back of the cockpit backrests here, we have an open hole, and that's where we store our oars. Graham's built a pair of take-apart oars that I'll show you later, and those fit in this hole and get stored for most of the time. Here we've got sheet block for the head sail, which right now is a roller furling sail that Graham recently sewed up. He's got it on a furling drum at the tip of the bowsprit, and it's furled up, and it's a masthead roller furling. I guess I'd call it a genoa. It's bigger than a jib. It's a big flat cut headsail, and he'll have it on the roller furling drum, and he can lower it via halyard so he can take it down and get rid of the windage if he wants to. And to support that, we've got a pair of running backstays that connect here at the tow rail with a Beckett block, and so that's a 2-to-1 running back that attaches at the right below the top of the mast, and that's controlled here, and that puts tension on the mast to keep the head sail from bending the mast forward. There's one on either side, and it cleats back here on the port side and the farthest starboard side edge of the foredeck. And what else have we got? I think we'll go ahead and get in the boat, and I can show you some more stuff in there. Okay, we're sitting in the cockpit now, and Graham's got a nice tiller extension on the rudder. Some of you know what this is made out of, others can guess. But it's aluminum, and it telescopes, and it's got these little little clips here, but it works really well. At the stern, we've got a cockpit hatch that leads down in there. It's kind of dark, but those white tubes on either side are the drain tubes for the actual cockpit footwell. So any water that gets in the cockpit drains through those tubes straight out the transom. So there's lots of storage there. There you can see the stiffener where the rudder gudgeons are bolted. The mizzen sheet cleats on this cam cleat here. It's just a single cam cleat. It's mounted pretty close to center. And the mizzen sheet goes aft to that little fair lead. And if you're not using the bumpkin, it just goes to a block there up to the mizzen sprit and back down to a eyelet here. But on his it goes to that fair lead and then back to the block is on the end of the bumpkin. Graham's designed his own tiller clutch. It's this starboard box here. It's two-piece and it's got a lever on the bottom, and when you rotate the lever it cams the line and that clutches the tiller line, and when you decam it the line can slide. We spent a long time figuring this out, but Graham ultimately came up with this solution. And you can buy ready-made tiller clutches, but we like to do it ourselves, so this is one we came up with. And that's what we use to lock the tiller off when you're using the wind vane, or if you just want to keep the boat tracking straight for a few seconds while you go forward to get something. Here we have the port cockpit locker, and right now, yes, there's a folding bicycle in there. It's a really deep locker. It's about, I can stick my arm and my elbow is in the locker, and it goes pretty far forward, obviously enough for a folding bike with 16-inch tires, so plenty of room. The outboard can fit in here, but not with the folding bike, so you can have one or the other, but the folding bike could also be stored in the cabin. We've got a gasket around the hatch here with a stiffening beam, and if we switch to the other side, there's an equal locker on this side for storing whatever you'd want in there. Another huge locker. And on Graham's boat, he's customized the cockpit by adding a refrigerator box. This is a box that's lined with 4 inches of foam all the way around and plywood inside, fiberglass. It drains into the cockpit. There's a drain down there, right there. And so he can fill this with ice and foodstuffs, and he can keep ice in there for up to 4 days, maybe longer depending on what the ambient temperature is. So he's got that access right in the cockpit. And here's the mizzen thwart. We've got the main sheet cleats here on port and starboard, and a rotating cleat. This is for the spinnaker or the head sail sheet. Handy to have that. And we've got standard controls for B&B boats here on the mizzen. We've got the mizzen snotter. Goes up to the snotter there. On the front side of the mast there's a mizzen halyard, and the downhaul here is a 2-to-1 standard downhaul with the hook. And for reefing the mizzen, we've got a pair of cleats on the sprit, and the reef line leads back to a cheek block, and through the cheek block it goes up through a hole in the reefing grommet, down the other side, and then back up through, and drilled a hole in the sprit and a stopper knot. So both reef lines work that way, and you just access them here from the cockpit because they're right over your head. So it's easy to reef the mizzen. And moving to the other side again, we can see the controls for the centerboard. This is the uphaul, excuse me, and it's cleated here. There goes the centerboard down. It's a weighted centerboard. And we've got a 4-to-1 tackle there, connected to a 2-to-1 tackle there. So it's an 8-to-1 uphaul. It's I'd say about 10 pounds of pull, not too bad. And when it goes block to block, she's all the way up. And with the cleat facing up, it's really easy to pull that. Here we have the aft cockpit sole access hatch. The ballast tank starts here behind the mizzen mast. So this portion of the hull is dry, but we want to be able to access it in case we do get moisture in there. We want to let it dry out. And if you wanted to, you could fill this with water. It may make the boat a bit stern heavy, but it would give you that extra bit of ballast. But as designed, the water ballast begins here, goes forward, and is between the two cockpit sides. It's about 300 pounds worth of water ballast. And there is the forward water ballast tank hatch. If you open that up, you reach down through there and you release the Anderson baler to flood the hatch. Graham's installed a fill pipe in there, and so he just takes a plug out, and the fill pipe goes into the centerboard trunk. So when he takes the plug out, it floods the water ballast tank via the centerboard trunk, and that way he doesn't have to have a hole in the bottom of the boat to flood the tank. And to drain the tank, he's got an Anderson baler, and he's also got a diaphragm pump on board that he can use to pump out the tank if he's, you know, becalmed and he wants to get the ballast out of the boat. There's where the centerboard uphaul goes into the trunk. We'll see that inside. Cubby holes either side of the bridge deck here, and for storing line, and those go straight to the back, so you can stuff your lines in there. And looking at the controls here on this far end side, we have an experimental bow board up and down haul. Here we have the spinnaker halyard. Here we have one that's yet to be determined. We've got an empty fairlead up there. This side is a bit experimental. And on the inside here we have downhaul number 1 and downhaul number 2. And so let's, I'll show you how we reef the mainsail. Try to do it from a first person point of view here. And on this side we've got reef line and another reef, another reef line. This is the halyard and this is the snotter. That the labels have gotten messed up because we're trying it out. And if you look at the main, it's a bit different. The reef lines come down from the reef grommets, and the back side comes underneath the sail up through the sprit to a stopper knot. That's the second reef. Here's the first reef here. So it's stopper knot there, under the sail, up the back side to the grommet, back down. They both go through their own cheek block. So this is the first reef, that's the second reef. Both lines run forward. The second reef runs through a clam cleat there on the sprit. The first reef runs up there through a cam cleat. I'll get you a shot of that. So here is where the first reef cleats to, through that cam cleat, and ahead of the cam cleat, or I should say behind the cam cleat, we've got a ramp with a slot cut in it, and this is shown in the rigging plan. And both these reef lines go up to a fairlead on the mast, independent of the snotter, down to the base of the mast. They both go through a 30mm block. They can both fit through a 30mm block there on the tabernacle, and then they're led back to the cockpit. Another thing that's added for making reefing a bit easier is, in addition to the primary downhaul, which I'll tug on here. So here's the primary downhaul. I think you can see that moving. And if we go to next to that, we have the secondary downhaul. I hope you can see that, but it's essentially a duplicate downhaul that, instead of attaching to the base of the mast, it attaches to the first reef point. So I'll do a quick main reef here, if we can try to make it work. First thing I'm going to do, slack off on the snotter, and the snotter drops down a little ways. Cleat that off. Next thing, I've got the main halyard here. I'm going to let the main halyard down, and the sail is coming down, and I'm just going to watch until that second reef gets to about where I want it, and I'll reach over and grab the second reef, and if I pull that line, I can start pulling it down. I'll lower it a little more. So there's our second reef downhaul, and now pull the sail the other side. Now I'll pull in the correct reefing line, And as I pull the reefing line, it automatically cleats into that cam cleat, and it starts to reef the sail. I know you can't see. Maybe I'll put the camera on a tripod after I do this. Okay, so now that was me pulling the reef line, and now we're at the first reef point. The reef line is cleated off on the sprit. So let me go forward here. Here there's the reef line cleated on the sprit. It has to be cleated on the sprit. If it's not cleated on the sprit, then you can't adjust the snodder. A lot of people ask, why don't you just cleat it to the deck? Well, that's why. So it's cleated on the sprit, and we've added this red plastic ball. To get the reef out, all I do is pull the reef line even harder, and when I pull the reef line a little bit harder, this ball rides up this ramp and it pops the line out of that cleat. So I'll try to do that. So I've got the reef line here, and I'm going to pull, and it popped, and now I can just pull on the back end here, and there comes the reef back out of the sail. There it goes. So we just shook the reef out now, and so now we can uncleat the downhaul and bring the halyard back up. And so there we are, back to having full sail. And then the last thing is to just retension the snodder. And now we're rigged like we were a minute ago. I'll try to do that again with the camera on a tripod so you can get a better view of it. So the first thing I'll do is slack off on the snodder. And next we'll lower the main sheet, the main halyard. And as I start to pull in the reef line, the line gets cleated off on the sprit, and now the reef is fully reefed, and I can tighten up the reef downhaul, and then finally I can retension the snodder. So there we put the first reef in the main without leaving the cockpit. So to shake that reef out, slack off on the snodder, I'll pull the reef line a little bit farther until the red ball uncleats itself. So there it's uncleated. And now I can release the second downhaul and hoist the sail back up to its full height. And now I can retension the snodder. And you can see we're back to full sail. And it only takes a matter of seconds. And we've only got that set up for the first reef because the second reef is far enough back on the sprit, that is, the line is so long that the cam cleat and the ball method just doesn't work. So when you pull in the second reef, the line just automatically cleats here at the sprit, and to take the second reef out, you just reach up and uncleat this. And we don't have a second hook set up for the second reef downhaul, just to try to eliminate an extra line on deck. It's not used as often, so when you do the second reef, you just have to pop up through the forehatch and hook the hook up onto the second reef downhaul grommet. And I want to show you down below, but I see Graham has installed his lock on the hatch. So if I find the key, we'll go down below. Otherwise, we'll suspend that part of the tour until Graham arrives. But what I can show you is that Graham has two drop boards with oval shaped ports, and this is in the companionway option for the CS17 Mark III kit. We do all these pieces with the windows. We do the sliding hatch. We do these rails with the dado cut for the slider. You can see the sliding hatch rides in this dadoed piece, and then there's a storm
edge here, so water has to go through that edge and then it drips down into this channel where it just drains out. So that's what makes it waterproof. And the sliding hatch goes into a garage top, this piece here, which is screwed down, and it has to be removable so that you can attach a anti pull-out cleat. Otherwise the hatch, you could just pull it and it would just keep on coming. That's how you actually get it out. And another thing Graham's added is a flange all the way around the deck, and that is intended to be the beginnings of his Dodger. The Dodger would come up on a bow that went across the top of the cabin and extend back for shading of the bridge deck, so you could sit here in the shade under the Dodger, and he was going to have windows. But I don't think he's got enough time to finish that for this trip. And then up forward you see his solar panel, and the solar panel is mounted to the fore hatch, so that whole panel lifts. There's a hinge along the aft edge, and that whole thing hinges up. And so I'll see if I can find the key, and in the meantime we'll go look at the tabernacle. Graham's added a little hook here out of plywood on the tabernacle, and that catches the mizzen mast, so that when the mizzen mast is down, it's got always a place to sit. It's a standard B&B tabernacle right off the plans, and you can see there a rubber gland where he's got his anchor light wires coming out, and they go to a plug underneath the edge of the deck here, about right here underneath, to keep them dry. And he's got the handle nut down at the bottom for fastening the tabernacle, and you can see there that tube that goes to the up and down haul for the experimental bow board, which Graham has designed to reduce leeway with the head sail when you're flying the sail forward of the beam of the boat. Also, from this angle you can see the spinnaker tube. This is a fiberglass tube that's attached to the bulkhead with a ring, and it's glassed through the front of the boat, and it extends out the front, and that's what the bowsprit attaches to, and it's on an angle so that the tip of the bowsprit is on the center line of the boat. And while we're up here, we can also see Graham's little tiny anchor bowsprit with a roller on the end, and so he can lower the anchor and raise the anchor, and it comes up on a roller and stores right there, and he can lash it off at the back end and the front end to secure it. Also right here you can see our B&B sail stop, how that works. It locks in the middle right there, and the new B&B sail track with the 5/8 plastic slides is what Graham's using, and it's working really well. And here we have the halyard block, snotter block. Here there's the two reef lines passing through the 30mm block. This was an experimental position that's no longer used. We have the first and second downhauls both tied off to an eye strap right here. And then over here, this green line. Green is the first downhaul. That's this right here, the downhaul. So this is the downhaul. The black line is downhaul number 2, and then the far green is a spinnaker halyard. And then here you can see where the experimental bow board exits the deck. Let's jump down and have a look at that. Okay, here's the experimental bow board. It's partially retracted right now, but it's in a slot off the keel. It's I would say about 1.5 square feet, and it comes down about to about that angle, so it rotates down, so this is almost vertical. And the idea is just to give some lateral plane in the front section of the boat. You can see its position there, and that's designed to reduce the lee helm of the boat when you're flying the spinnaker forward of a beam reach.
and that's what the idea there is. Also, here you can see the little storm edge for the forehatch, a breakwater is what I'm going to say, and so that keeps water just plowing into this edge. This hatch has a gasket on it, but it's nice to have that breakwater just to keep water from pressurizing into the edge of the hatch. Okay, I found a key. Let's have a look in Graham's boat. So here's the washboards coming out. Okay, so it's a nice big hatch opening. This slides open. I bang my shoes off. Okay, I'm just sitting on the sill here, and Graham's just throwing his stuff down in there. He did not sleep in the boat last night. He slept at home, but he's getting it ready for sleeping. So you're getting an accurate depiction here. And so let's see. We'll start looking aft. Here we have the bulkhead number 3. This is the companionway bulkhead. And he's got a power panel there going to a battery in a battery box. And this handy little shelf space here is the forward lid to the water ballast tank. And that space is designed for a portable porta potty that can be taken out and put in the cockpit for camping overnight. And it just can store there. It can be used in the cabin. It can be used in the cockpit at night. And here you can see this is bulkhead number 4. There it's sealed off because Graham opted to take that space for, if you remember, the cooler box right there. And so behind that wall is the cooler box. On the port side of the boat, that wall is not blocked off. And you can see you've got full space all the way back to that bulkhead, which on the other side of that bulkhead is the cockpit locker. So there's a huge amount of space back in here. I can almost climb in there, and you can stuff all of your bedding, pillows, clothes, duffel bags, dry stuff, dry storage back in there. And that is all behind the actual berth. So the berth extends under the bridge deck from bulkhead 3 to bulkhead 4, and further back in there is additional storage. So there's really a huge amount of space. Here is the front edge of the centerboard trunk. And so if I move some stuff out of the way, sorry Graham. Here is the centerboard pennant cap, and you can see there the centerboard uphaul comes through the bulkhead there, through that block, and then down into the centerboard trunk. And it's a nice Lexan cap so you can see what's going on. It could be plywood, but this one happens to be Lexan. So this is the front half of the trunk. And the centerboard actually pivots right here on this starboard cap. This is a cap that we make, and it's got a machined groove inside that mates against this face, and there's an O-ring that goes between these 3 screws. And these are CNC machines, so they go on in any orientation. And so the pivot bolt is behind this, and it's sealed with an O-ring that presses against this stiffener. And we've got little cockpit lockers. They're not very deep, these lockers, but they still are deep enough for a shallow plastic box or canned goods. There's a hatch there. Again, not very deep, but it's a 17-foot boat that sleeps 2 people, so you can't be too greedy. We've got a little voltmeter here. Anchor light, running light, cabin light, bilge pump. That one's not hooked up. There's no electric bilge pump that I'm aware of. And these are probably some cabin lights. Here you can see the inside of our B&B deadlight trim ring. And those bolts, 1032 bolts, go into threaded inserts, riv nuts actually, that are installed from
this side. They're installed and rivet nutted into the plywood and then capped by the outside trim ring. So the Lexan goes in with bedding compound, then this trim ring goes on with bedding compound, and then these screws thread into riv nuts, and that's what holds the two rings together and squeezes the Lexan. Here you can see the CNC cut finger joint joining the hull panel and the shear strake panel. And if I step back, here's the knee that supports the cabin and deck beams there. So you can see the sliding hatch slides over this portion of the deck head, and forward here is the lifting hatch. And this is pretty cool. Graham's come up with these dogs for his hatch. It's a starboard knob with a 1/4 thread, I think, with a nylock so they can't fall out. Sorry, Graham, I'm giving away all your secrets. And one on this side, and these are threaded into a custom-made bronze threaded bushing with a flange on top, so it's super strong. Here you can see the black gasket that's being squeezed. And on this side, 2 pieces of B&B sail track with some custom-made starboard sliders, and this is a piece of fiberglass batten. And when we lift this, that slider goes forward, and that holds the hatch up. So there, it's in the forward position, and now the hatch is held, and I can rotate this back to give me any amount of opening that I want. And you can see the gasket there. And so let's have a poke out the top. Hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. Now we're standing up out of the hatch. We've got a piece of webbing here that keeps it from opening too far. But here's the hatch. There's the solar panel. And I'm standing on the forward end of the bunk here. And from this position, I can just reach everything. I can reach the downhaul of the sail. I can hank the sail on. If I reach forward, I can easily reach the mast bolt. I can reach the anchor. I can reach the anchor roller from here. So that's pretty far forward. And I'm about up to my upper thigh, so I'm totally held in by the hatch. And there's Deja barking away. Deja! She's being spooked by somebody. Alright, so let's go back down below. And I'll bring the hatch down with us here. Okay, the hatch is shut, and the dog is threaded. Just a little tension on that. Really easy to use, and the hatch is dogged. Okay, on the front bulkhead, this is the tabernacle bolt that holds the mast up, and the nut is on the front side. So when you hoist the mast drops down into the tabernacle. That bolt goes through the base of the mast, and then the nut goes on the front side. It's pretty simple. This right here is a fairly recent invention, but it's a 8-inch opening port that opens right into the anchor locker. And you might think that's a bad idea, but it's totally covered by the foredeck. So even in a driving rain, no water gets through this port. And from this position, you can see the masthead light plug. And so that's protected by the elements, and the wire comes back through into the cabin here. So here's another view of the bowsprit tube. There's the eye bolt with reinforcement, side stringer. There's the tabernacle bolt. There's the head of the boat. And here's all the room for your anchor and chain and whatnot. So this gives you really nice ventilation in the cabin when you're anchored. Okay, in the forepeak here, I guess we'll call this the forepeak, we've got the experimental bow board is in a trunk. That's what you're seeing there. And the bottom of the tabernacle bulkhead, there's another port there that just gives access to that forward space. We don't usually store anything in there, but if we needed to ventilate it, it's nice to have a screw port there. And there's 2 hatches on either side, lots of capacity. And I'll back up so you can see where I am. This is a little forward area. This is above and forward of the sleeping space. So this is all extra storage. Some people, I think Peter McCreary has built a bookshelf across here to store more items along here. You could store a folding bike across that bulkhead. Here's another shot of the deck framing. And then looking down, here's the forward end of the berth. There's a fair amount of storage in here. That locker is about 8 or 9 inches deep. Little turn buttons just keep the lockers shut. And on the port side of the boat, we have matching lockers that you've already seen on the starboard side. 2 more ports on the port side. There's 4 ports total. And the battery's in a box. This could be covered over for a step, but we find that it's not that big of a step, so you can just step down onto the bunk. And that's about it. So I'll give you an idea of how long the berth is. I'll put my feet here. I've got about 2 inches between my foot and the bulkhead. And now I'll lay back. And at the risk of embarrassing myself, I'll point the camera at myself. And so I've got a further, 2 inches, and I'm 6 foot even, and that's me with boots on. So the berth is about 6'6", I'd say. Very comfortable. And I've got plenty of room along the side. So this is me in the starboard berth of the 17 Mark III. I think I had you upside down. So I've got about 2 inches. So that's about it. That's what Graham is about to set off on his trip south to Florida for the Everglades Challenge 2017. Excuse me. We're here at B&B at the shop. He's making final preparations. And thanks for watching, and we'll check you later. And this black line is, I'm not sure. What is the black line? The black line, I'll have to think about that one.